Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, do I have a for you today. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, but before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Caring is an action, not just an emotion. Cosmo cares. Our guest today, Cosmo DeNicola, is the founder of many companies. Actually, a Temple graduate in 1981, started a business with his beloved Janet. It was a company called Amtech, and grew that into a host of businesses, a holding company of family businesses. Started seven, bought 10, sold seven. But beyond all that, today he's focused on philanthropy with the DeNicola Family Foundation, cultural diplomacy, conservation, and so much more. So I'm excited to pick your brain and learn business and really the pursuit of entrepreneurship. So pay attention, everyone. Listen very carefully and take notes. Thanks for coming on. Oh, and I should say, shout out to Cosmo's cousin, Mark Gatta, who told me to follow Cosmo years and years and years ago, and who's been a joy on our show. So thanks for coming on.
Mark is a great guy. He's a great cousin. He's a great person. He's a great father. I could just go on and on. We could do a show about how wonderful Mark is.
It's something we share.
Yep,
He supported
absolutely.
me in the beginning of Culture Matters and was always, just a positive, wonderful guy. And he talks the world of you. So I should shout him out.
I'm happy to be here, Jay, and I'm happy to share a story with your listeners. I'm a little bit older than you gave me credit for. I graduated from Temple in '76, not in '81. In '81, I started our tech company.
Yeah, oh, I must have confused that. Darn.
That's not a problem. I usually don't correct anyone when they make me younger, but I like to be accurate with dates.
Now, so you graduated business administration and under accounting, correct?
So when I went to Temple, and at that time, my families, both sides of my families were Italian immigrants, and we lived very modestly in Philadelphia. And the story has been told a million times about the first person in our family to go to college, and I just happened to be that. And when it came time to look for colleges, it had to be something that I could drive to. It certainly wasn't something that I was going to fly to and live on campus. Very similar to the New York Giants football quarterback, DeVito, DeNicola here, wanted to stay at home with mom and dad and let them cook and clean and take good care of me while I studied. So I always dreamt of being a doctor from the time I was young, and Temple was 10 minutes away, and it was a great university and had all types of opportunities to study in different areas. And but I went to Temple for two reasons. Number one, to become a doctor, and number two, to play football. And in that era of Temple in the mid 70s, they were a top 25 football team that was challenging Penn State all the time. So it's kind of where it all began. And I loved my experience at Temple University.
When you were young, though, were there any inklings of becoming an entrepreneur? Any family members close that had pursued that route whatsoever that could have led to that inevitable outcome?
My father was a carpenter contractor, one of those independent guys that back in those days would do kitchens and basements and things of that nature. And so he was always independent. And I liked being independent. I had my first job when I was 12, and I was kind of a serious child. I wanted to do things and I wanted to keep busy. But my dreams were never really that specific. And as my career and my life evolved, um, my dreams were about being successful, about being competitive, about winning, about being a nice person, about making my mother and grandmother and father proud of me. So that was always the kind of the bubble of my dreams. It wasn't about making money. It never was about having fame. And as I realized some amazing and interesting accomplishments in the future, people would ask me, did I ever think I'd own a football team? Did I ever think I would do this? And my answer was always, no, not really. It was never that granular. But the one specific goal I had in my life was to become a doctor. And of course, I saw visions of myself winning the Heisman Trophy as a football player.
You out of school, you started DeNicola and Associates with Janet and Joseph Fares.
Joseph Fares. So in 1976, after I graduated with an accounting degree, and the interesting part of that was I wanted to be a doctor. So I had all of the pre-med courses, and it took me about 1.5 semesters to realize biology and chemistry weren't for me. And, and a life as a doctor was never going to happen. So I thought back to high school and started thinking about, what courses did I enjoy and what did I do well at? And I had a one accounting course that I ended up acing and getting an A. And I just thought, you know what, let me just try this. And I tried it and I loved it. I was a natural at it. I was really good with numbers and just acclimated to, accountancy and picked it up real fast. And after my sophomore year, my wife and I decided to get married. And I ended up with a job at a local manufacturing plant as a junior accountant. And while I was newly married and had a real day job, I switched to night school and weekend school and still graduated in 4 years with an accounting degree. So one of the things that you could do as a young accountant is our tax returns and small business accounting. And in the neighborhoods then, people would would trust you because you were one of them. And I was able to trade on that a little bit, a nice Italian guy from the neighborhood. And I would do just about anything, anywhere, anytime to, help clients in the neighborhood. And, we launched an accounting and tax practice, and my wife joined me, and my best friend, Joe, joined me. And that was the start in 1976.
Where was the inspiration with Amtech? Because it seems like a big leap. Or was that associated with the plant you were at and plants you were engaged?
So I was still in the manufacturing business as a accountant, and I had this accounting practice on the side with a small office. And but I continued to have a day job, and I worked a few years for one company, and then I advanced to a higher level position as controller of a manufacturing company that was very progressive for their times. This was the mid 70s, and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were just really coming into their own, and computers became affordable for mid-sized companies. And the progressive owners that I worked for gave me the opportunity to build software, and I took advantage of that, and I designed it, and working with a team of programmers and engineers, created a software package specifically for the packaging industry. And we did a real nice job, and we used it ourselves. And at one point I thought, boy, we could probably sell this. So we formed a company, myself and the two owners of this packaging company, and launched it. And, there I was a real entrepreneur at that point. Wow. And trying to sell something to people that were generally 30 to 40 years older than me, and trying to sell them something new, computers and software, and trying to sell it across the country where, my reputation was zero and I was just kind of a young kid. But that's how it all started. And again, very similar to the accounting practice, my wife was by my side, and we were partners and started creating this software for an industry, and built the business one customer at a time across the country. And it was a very rewarding business that we kept 41 years.
Wow. Our listeners, a lot of them are in that boat in the late 20s, early 30s, like myself. What advice do you have for them building relationships with those senior to them that have they're in a position of power and authority, and what advice?
Well, times have changed. In the 70s, I remember in the 80s, losing a lot of opportunities because they would say, you're just a kid.
Yeah.
And they said, come back when you have gray in your temples. Well, that all changed, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Being just a kid, is actually an asset because you're deemed as more creative, more current, more up to date, where it was a liability for me. So, the advice that I would give relative to my success journey will be a little different today for young people than it was for me, because I had to act old, even to the point of having an interview with Dun& Bradstreet and giving the wrong birth date, just so if any prospective customers would look me up, I would appear older than what my real age was. But today, you could be young and be a billionaire and be the sharpest, most respected person on the internet or apps or whatever your vocation may be. But in terms of advice, it's the realization that you can't do it all yourself. You have to build teams. You have to be a leader. You have to be fearless. Since I came from a modest background, we weren't poor, but a modest background, I never had anything to lose. So I could go and just try things and fail and just work really hard with my wife by my side, who was working by my side and also stood behind me and would contribute great ideas and lead to some of the success because we were a team. But it's about, building teams, being a leader. Don't be afraid, and don't do it for the money. Do it for the opportunity it will create. Not that money is unimportant, and I'm not saying do things that are fun, because sometimes you can do things that are fun that are not really rewarding. You may have a good time, but it may not be rewarding to you, your family, your legacy, and the people around you. So I think the fearlessness, be willing to compete, work hard at winning, and just work hard every single day, and go to bed tired. I have a story I talk about. For me and my employees, I always want to sweat, and I want all my employees to sweat as well. People are like, well, what do you mean sweat? That sounds terrible. I'm like, no, I don't want them to perspire, because if they perspire, they're nervous, they're worried, they're anxious. But if they sweat, that means that they're working really hard and leaving it, on the field.
What were some of Janet's strengths? It sounds like you guys were partners in this.
Well, I was always the salesperson. She was the operations person. So, I would have the vision and kind of create the products, and she would make them work. And obviously, you can have great vision, but if your products don't work, it's a problem. Her largest contribution to the business was an understanding that technology was very new, and things we take for granted now that everyone's technically literate. In the 80s and the 90s, not everyone was literate. They used to laugh about giving a cell phone to an old person who was older than 50 years old. Are they going to really understand how to do that? So, my wife, Janet, recognized that IT support would be a very important component of making users successful, and for people to be able to optimize the value proposition of the products that we were selling. So we spun off a company called Futura, and Futura was the IT support and help desk. And help desk was a term that wasn't really known at that time. Now we take customer service and IT support, it's very ubiquitous. Back then, it was almost impossible to get. Everyone had this person they knew that was really sharp. But so I would say her biggest contribution was, respecting operations, working hard at it, having people that were dedicated and loyal to delivering great service to the client, and being able to answer questions that would help make the technology useful.
Did she do a lot of the hiring back then when you guys were small?
So we kind of kept the hiring on those same lines. I would hire the salesmen and the creatives. She would hire the programmers, the support people, the admin people, etc. And we were always looking. Both of us were looking for a spark. We wanted people that loved to work, that lived to work. And now, with this whole concept of life work, balance.
Yeah.
We wanted people to love working. So, work and life were synonymous, not two separate things. And we were able to accomplish that. Probably our largest accomplishment was uh, getting people to, buy into that and live it every single day.
That brings me to culture. What were your views on the culture that you created?
Well, when I would sit down or in the early days and talk to prospective customers, I actually use that as a very important line. I would say, look, as an owner of a company, the only thing you can really control is the culture. What your people say and do, and when they're out in the field, at some point it becomes their individual expression of what the company wants to accomplish. However, culture we could establish, and it was, risk takers, hard workers, family oriented, creative, fearless, things of that nature. That was the culture that we created, and were probably the thing that we're the most proud of.
Do you think that there's a rise of couples working together nowadays, or is that diminishing? I ask because some part of me feels like you were ahead of the curve on that, or is that starting to blossom then? Just kind of thinking off the top, it seems like a unique thing.
It was very unique. We'll be married 50 years this August,
Oh,
and we
congratulations.
were in business 42 of those 50 years. And it wasn't always easy. I mean, if she was sitting side by side with me, she would probably say it was never easy. Uh, but and then she would say, of course, Cosmo's in sales, so he'll give you maybe a rose-colored glasses view of what it was like. But there were times where we had a set of opinions. Sales and marketing and technology intersect at times, and there's resources that are always limited in a small business. I'm sorry if you hear any background noise. Uh, there's an issue with resources that are limited, so you're always kind of pulling and pushing to get the proper resources to do the best you could possibly do for your area of expertise. But at the end of the day, we loved each other on a personal level, and we were committed to what we were doing, and took a lot of pride in it.
Did you have a vision of where you want your family to be in a certain place that you were both working towards? Or did it come just even so organic? I'm curious how.
Well, as our children got older, graduated college, our son was heavily involved in a business and loved it. And then he ended up getting married, and his spouse became heavily involved in a business and loved it. And there was a family plan to transition the business. This tech company we're talking about, because remember, I own 10 companies, but we own 10 companies, but the tech company was going to be transitioned to my son and daughter-in-law. And 3 years ago, someone came in and made us an astounding offer while valuations were going way up. And we
Wow.
took advantage of that. And now we're kind of resetting based on each person's individual interests as to what we're going to pursue now. So it's given us the economic wherewithal and the freedom to live our own dreams rather than living the dream of dad and mom.
Were you a fan or a student of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger?
I was an observant fan of theirs, and I have a belief in fundamental value. There are a lot of things that uh, I was I was sitting two steps away from uh, the CEO of AMC at an event over the weekend, and I could never have that job. It would just be too
Wow.
complicated for me. But I like the practical nature that they had. That they wanted a solid business, and they wanted to understand the fundamentals, and they wanted to keep them. And that's kind of what we did with our tech company. That was the oldest company that we had, and we kept it. And the only reason we sold it was that so-called offer you couldn't refuse at the right time.
Yeah, rest in peace, Charlie Munger. November 28th, he was 99. Amazing career that he had. Um, on did you consider yourself an investor along the way, or did that kind of happen just as a product of being such a strong operator?
No, I never really liked the concept of investing because uh, my inclination is to be an operations person, which means
Hmm.
hands on, and by nature, I'm what's called a locker room leader. So even when I owned the two arena football teams, I'd be in the locker room before I'd be on the field before the game, in the locker room at halftime, and in the locker room
Wow.
afterwards. And I was very hands-on, and that's the way I was with all my businesses. So um, I have invested in some businesses, uh, and although you may get some economic opportunities from them, you just don't get the same kind of joy and fulfillment that you get from being an operator. So I typically don't invest unless I'm going to have a role.
So yeah, the locker room leader you're talking about.
Mhm.
So what does that look like? Your hands are dirty? Like, what's your
Oh,
methodology? Because that
Your hand,
sounds very healthy.
your hands are always dirty if you're a locker room leader because you're doing things that other leaders don't do, and that's good and bad. So, if someone's doing a great job, you have to be there and reinforce that. If they're not doing a great job, you got to be there and you have to teach, you have to lead, you have to mentor, you have to understand what's happening. And so to be a locker room leader, you have to be engaged in the day-to-day happenings of the business and how people impact and how people are impacted by the businesses, your customers, your market, an industry, your employees, your vendors, etc.
Hmm. When you did you look at the whole business as a like almost like an organism, all the moving parts connecting? Is that always how you looked at things?
Absolutely. You have to connect the dots in business. If you're going to be an operator, if you're going to be an investor, basically need, spreadsheets and creativity.
Hmm.
Uh, but as a locker room leader, you really have to understand, all those elements about the business because, you may be the most creative IT person in the world, but if you can't develop practical applications that people will use, then you're going to fail. If you create great applications, but no one really needs them, you're not going to create a need for your products and services. So, uh, from my standpoint, I always felt I needed to know a lot. Now, in my various businesses in healthcare, I understood the practical aspects of what people would need, whether it was chronic disease management or point of care or electronic medical records. I always had a practical understanding of the underlying technology that was going to deliver the service. Uh, when I ended up in sports and professional football, first as an owner of two arena football teams, and then as an owner of a sports agency representing professional athletes, I needed to understand not only the sport, but the people in the sport and their families. So you have to be a bit of a student there because, or else you end up being the Monday morning quarterback criticizing everybody for the failings of the Sunday game. And if you're an operator, you want to impact the Sunday game, not criticize and offer suggestions from what you saw. You want to impact so
Hmm.
that you win on Sunday, so that you can add value on Monday as well. So
Did,
it was always about understanding, and even recognizing the personality traits of another business I owned where we represented actors and actresses, understanding how talent is and what their nature is so that you end up being, supportive of them, rather than just, someone who has expectations out of their performances.
did you notice that there was a connection between how the talent was represented in the sports, for example, and the actual playing and performance and outcome on the field?
Well,
There
it's
was
it's
a
it's very important because the first thing you have to understand is whether it's an actor, actress, or an athlete,
yeah.
they're human beings, and they have human issues: mom, dad, wife, girlfriend, children, community. You need to understand that, and you also understand that none of these people, they're all unique, first of all. And since they're all unique, there isn't some rule of thumb you can use to, talk to a wide receiver that you would say talk to a lineman. Their bodies are different, their body images are different, how they were treated as a child,
Wow.
how they were treated in college. They were very different. So you have to understand individuals, and you have to understand where they're coming from and their family situation. Is it a single parent situation? In a lot of cases, were there any parents
Wow.
that were around? And the opposite is true too. Expectations because of parents that have high expectations of the children and are overly involved in their children's and then young adults' careers. So I would say understanding people. When it came to talent management, it's really understanding people and helping them be the best they could possibly be. Again, connecting the dots, very similar to what you would do in any business, but uh, the the use case is different because it's talent. That's why they call it talent management.
Yeah. What position did you play in sport? You were in football, right?
I was mediocre at everything. So I did it all. Uh, I always talk about that one season I was the quarterback for the Leprechauns. Of course, I can't find any pictures to prove it. And
That's
when I
good.
found my most valuable player certificate, it doesn't even have a date on it.
Wow.
So it's kind of comical. But if you were to ask me what was my main position and what would it be today, it was cornerback. So I was a defensive back playing in an era where no one passed the ball, which means it was like sweep right, sweep left. Here comes the cornerback. You got to take
Mm.
on the guard. You have to take on the fullback, and then you have to make the tackle. And I'd like to believe I was a tough, strong kid, and I was fearless. But I wasn't really great at any sport. I think I was good at everything, but not great at anything. And when I went to Temple, I wanted to play football, right? That was the other half of I wanted to play
Yeah.
football and become a doctor. And the head coach at the time met me in my freshman orientation. And he said, Cosmo, he said, not that you're not going to win the Heisman Trophy, but I project you to make the team and hold blocking dummies for 4 years. He said, so you'll make the team and you'll go to games, but you're going to basically during the week hold the blocking dummies and probably not play on the weekends. So he put it right straight out. He said, look, you need to make a decision. You want to be a doctor? You love pharmacy? Or you want to play football? He said, I don't think you could do both. So I had to make a decision. And at the time, I lived in the inner city and we had neighborhood football teams, and you could play in those leagues, sandlot leagues, they called, until you were almost 40. So I thought, you know what, I can play football and get my competitive nature out on the sandlot. I want a serious education. So, I chose the education over football. And it's probably one of two or three regrets I have in my life that I didn't give myself a chance. I let someone talk me out of it
Good.
because I really wanted to play. And
Hmm.
in 2012, I gave the commencement speech at Temple University. And the title of the speech was, I went to Temple to play football and to be a doctor, and I did neither.
Wow. Um, what about the role of honesty? This guy sounded like he was straight with you. Do you think that has landed in your career one way or another?
Absolutely. I'd like to believe I'm very open and honest with people when they ask me questions and about their opportunities and all. And I probably would have held the blocking dummies for 4 years, but I would have been the best darn blocking dummy holder ever in the history of the NCAA. So, from that standpoint, I didn't have illusions or delusions. I didn't see myself winning the Heisman Trophy. I knew my limitations, and I think that was part of my secret sauce, that I really know how hard and how far I could push myself, all the time. And I still, have that awareness today, even in my current life and state and age. But he was honest. And I made a decision. I figured I could have my cake and eat it too. I could go to school. I could become a doctor. I could save lives. I can help my grandmother live to be 100 years old because I'm going to be her medical savior. And I'll also be able to play football and be a Heisman Trophy winner on the weekends.
Didn't is it pronounced Futura?
Right.
Didn't it pivot its or evolve its way into something I read on one out of three hospitals has something
Yeah,
to do with
so we
another
were
company?
very big in point of care. So when electronic medical records came to be, one of our businesses was we would go to hospitals and we would train people how to use Siemens and Epic. They were the two leading software packages. We would train people how to use electronic medical records. Now, the big issue was, okay, if all this is going to be on a computer, how does it go from the patient to the doctor to the records? So we were selling these point of care carts. If you've been in a hospital, these carts with a computer on it that gets wheeled right to the bedside, and the doctor and or nurse, talks to the patient, fills in the data, wheels the cart out. So we had supplied those carts to one of every three hospitals in the country, and there's just under 6,000. So we had about 2,000 hospitals that were customers.
When it comes to maintaining relationships of service, right? Company to client, what advice would you have? Or actually, let's invert. Let's say you wanted to undermine the relationship. What are some things that you would advise to do to undermine the relationship, right? If you wanted to undo a strong relationship.
Well, it's near and dear to my heart because when people say that, what's your secret sauce? Why were you so successful? And I'd say, because I'm a competitor. That's the thing I wanted to do. I want to win. And not necessarily win at all costs, because there are lines that I just would not cross, but I was a very aggressive competitor. And in my software business, which was a smaller marketplace, when my competitors saw me engaged with a prospect, they knew I was going to go hard and strong. In the healthcare industry, it's a bigger, more sophisticated, white collar type of industry. So your competitors don't really know you individually. Where in the tech world, everyone knows Elon Musk, and here he comes. If he's coming after your business, it's going to be a battle. And again, I'm not trying to compare myself to him, but he's a personality. And I would say in my tech businesses, I was a personality. In healthcare, it was more about what we could deliver. So competitive, competitive, competitive. And so I always made sure that every PowerPoint, every conversation, every dinner, drink, or whatever interaction with a prospect would always have a differentiation between us and our competitors. And I was not afraid to be bold and fearless and make claims. Of course, I had to believe them as true, but I was always do that. Now, that's different than being dirty and saying bad things about your competitor, but I was never afraid to say, we're better for you, and this is why. And that does not come natural to every salesperson because, a lot of times people feel like that's a little too, what's the right word?
Brash?
Brash. Yeah, it's a great word. Good choice. Arrogant, brash, things of that nature. And I'm like, no, I just think it's effective communication because I believe it. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. And I know we're going to deliver it because I know the people behind me are going to deliver it. And in that more blue collarish tech world that I was in, customers really love that because that's how they sold. But when you get into, healthcare and you're dealing with the CEO of a hospital, and they're coming from, these great institutions of higher learning, they don't usually get, in the mud too much. So I had to change my pitch a little bit there and talk about why we were better for them than our competition, but be specific. A lot of times when marketing people get together, they throw a lot of these words: more productive, more cost effective, and just a bunch of words. You have to have a message, and and our message was, we're going to have the best price, we're going to have the best service, we're going to have the best products, and we're going to have the best relationship. And if everything goes great, we're all going to enjoy it. If it's not going great, we're going to fix it and fix it right away.
Where a lot of these in the beginning acquisitions, uh, either vertical or horizontal because you were trying to create a competitive edge for Amtech in the beginning? Was that the move?
Well, the only thing that was horizontal with Amtech was the spin-off of the IT company. And then we started creating capabilities within IT support, which put us in a position where we could support healthcare products. But each of these companies were separate entities with their own organization, their own leadership, their own market plan, their own resources. Um, so there was a dot that connected every single one of them in one form or another. But they really were separate organizations, and how we got in them was interesting. In healthcare, we were doing IT support with a company, and we were doing software support, and that led to the hardware part of their business. And we ended up creating a second type of support group within our company, and they were more mechanical than electronic. So we had, IT, and we had electronic, and we had mechanical support, and kind of evolved that way. But each time we felt that we were onto something, we spun it off, created an entity, and created, a unique company with its own leadership. When you get into talent management, sometimes that happened, by mistake. One of my executives had a brother who wanted to expand his talent management company to Hollywood, and they were a New York-based company for 30 years. So I got involved in that, and I did that. On the football side, I was in the arena football business, and as a result of that, people respected me and how I treated players and how we won championships and competed on the football field. And that made people interested in me and made it easier for me to reach out to someone like Lee Steinberg, the inspiration for Jerry Maguire, and say, Lee, I think I could be a great partner for you. Let's do something together. So, some of these things were relationships and dots, and some of them were direct, but they were all separate businesses.
So that could be a master class on leadership, essentially, because there's many leaders that they're having a hard time even leading their own organization, let alone be someone a leader of an organization looks to for guidance.
Well, you need a quality and the ability to compartmentalize. And if you would have been in my office, I had these whiteboards, and they were sliding whiteboards. And literally on each company, I would have what I viewed as my goals, not the company goals, my goals. What can I do to impact our results, products, whatever the case may be? And I could just slide them. When 1 minute you're trying to convince a hospital to spend $1 million with you, the next minute you're trying to convince a manufacturer to spend $100,000, and the next minute you're trying to get a person to buy a $10 arena football ticket. You need the ability to disconnect, focus, and be in the moment. And that, I think, that is another one of my qualities that's unique, that I can kind of move on from one thing to the next, and then just kind of circle back when it's time to focus. Because as I just went through those three specific situations, it wasn't like they occurred each, different months. They would occur within an hour of every
Wow.
day.
To someone that's working on their ability to compartmentalize or their self-awareness, work through their emotion, what advice do you have for them?
Breathe, because the older I got, the better I understood the human body and the mind, and the fact that you do need to disconnect one thing and go on to the next thing. Now, if you think about it, let's talk about Windows, right? You're on one screen, you're looking at it, and you minimize it, right? And then you go into the next and you minimize that, right? And you're building all these apps down there. Well, when you're ready to go back, you just click on it and it comes back up. Versus if you turned off your computer and you had to reboot, how long would it take? How inefficient would that be? So when you're able to compartmentalize and you can minimize your apps, you can go right back to them as soon as you're done. But if you need to turn it off, then it's going to be hard to get back quickly mentally and physically.
Mm. What does it take to create a winning team in the sports arena? I believe it was 2 world championships and 6 conference titles. That's a lot.
Well, my partner Lee Steinberg has a great way of expressing drafting quarterbacks. He said at one point before I joined his company, on a forget what year it was, half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL were his clients.
Wow.
Imagine that, half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL were his clients. And he said, look, there are a lot of quarterbacks that can get you to the championship game, get you to the Super Bowl. You want someone that will get you through the Super Bowl and through the championship. So I think early in my career, I was 0 for 4, my first 4 championship games, 2
Wow.
with one team, 2 with the next. And we didn't have the right combination of coach and players to get us to and through the championship. So that was the difference at the end of the day. It's not a poor reflection of the other players and coaches that got us to the games. They were pretty terrific. But I think the ability to breathe and be calm in the moment, think Joe Montana, think Tom Brady, just be calm in the moment and be able to execute in a way without being, too hyper, I think is a great trait. And I think that was the difference.
Having spent time with Lee, what would you say are some qualities that have led to that organization culture being able to be so effective in that picking?
I think he's smart, generally the smartest guy in the room. And I think he's thoughtful and he takes a holistic approach. So he wants to believe in a person as a human being, and his players, and I'll use the word his because, he started it long before I joined him. I've been with him 9 years now. His players have donated over $1 billion to charity. So it was his philosophy that the players that we represent would go back to their communities, to their high school, elementary schools, neighborhoods, colleges, and give back and set up foundations. And they did. So, these are the type of people that he wanted to represent. And in most cases, have been the type of people he represented.
I wonder if that has an impact on the player to be capable of giving. There's something there in their awareness,
Well,
character.
think of it, depending on their background, it may come natural because, they had the support of the community and things of that nature.
Mm.
And in other cases, it just may be, a very positive life experience that they're now in a position to help people in a way that they were or maybe weren't helped when they were younger. So, it's always good, and the players take a lot of pride in that. We have a series of humanitarian awards we give out, the Steinberg DeNicola Humanitarian Award, and we give it out at our party the day before the Super Bowl in the host city. So I think we're close to 60 coaches,
Yeah, what is it, 8 a year?
players, yep, that we've given the award to. And it's always great to be on stage with some of these outstanding people and see how much they care about their communities and give.
I just on that thought, the latter individual that may not have had that, maybe giving it increases their ability to trust and then cooperate with a team better. That's just something that comes to mind.
Well, and earning that trust as an agent or a manager is very difficult. Just because you're nice and friendly
Yeah.
and smile a lot and make a lot of promises doesn't mean you earn it. You earn it over time, and you earn it by being consistent, and you earn it by being honest. So, and that doesn't always work because sometimes people don't want you to be honest, don't want you to be transparent, and want to be totally independent. But we've been fortunate in my 9 years of experience to have some, amazing clients that do amazing things on the field and off the field as well.
I'd like to understand your philosophy around this quote. Caring is an action, not just an emotion. Powerful.
to be perfectly honest, it's a better way of saying, money talks and bullshit walks, put your money where your mouth is. It's great to say, well, I care about this, I love this. Well, guess what? If all you're doing is using words, talk is cheap. So, it's just something that makes us realize every day that whatever you're saying, whatever you believe in it, you have to live it, you have to own it. And I think it's an important guiding principle we use in our family foundation and in the businesses that I've been associated with.
I'm laughing because that sounds like your healthcare mantra, and the tech one is the bullshit one.
Yeah,
That's like
yeah,
your tech talk.
absolutely.
The cultural diplomacy I thought was interesting. What can you unpack that a little bit? That's one of the parts of the nonprofit.
Sure, it's probably the most challenging thing that we do. So we have a family foundation called the DeNicola Family Foundation, and we like to believe that we're representing our entire family, with origins in Italy and today expanding here in the U.S. So from that standpoint, we started looking for things that were meaningful to us, and there are things such as conservation that relates to water and animals and things of that nature, humanitarian recognition, which is recognizing people to do wonderful things, global health. We do a lot of things in Africa to help with, limited resources and yeah, basically young people and getting them an education and keeping them healthy. But the fourth passion we have is cultural diplomacy. And basically what that is getting people to talk to each other that wouldn't necessarily talk to each other or may have some common interests. So we get involved in a lot of different areas. We're an NGO, it's called the Humpty Dumpty Institute, where we will go out and bring a congressional delegation to a foreign country and get them to understand some of the unique problems that they have there so that when they go back to Congress, they're able to articulate those needs and support those needs and maybe help that country. Other things we do with film, music, and art is that one program we went to Iraq and we funded, along with the embassy there, a program to bring a group of young filmmakers from Iraq, bring them to a film school. At that time, it was UCLA Film School, get them trained at the school, and then go back and create short films about their plight.
Wow.
And some of those short films that came back ended up in film festivals. One won a Berlin Film Festival. The other one was a finalist in the Tribeca Film Festival. So we do things like that where we support young people and we want to understand from a young person's perspective what's going on in Iraq at the time.
Yeah.
It's not political. It's just an understanding. We also would bring musical acts from the U.S. In fact, one of the ladies that was an icon, Mary Wilson of the Supremes, was one of our ambassadors, and she would do concerts around the country, around the world, and either at the behest of the State Department or a foreign country's embassy. And what we would do is we try to present Western culture in a positive way, so they see us beyond, how some people see the West. And we did this with music, with art. We had a group of young Chinese artists, and we brought them to the United Nations, and they presented their unique forms of art that express, again, apolitical, non-political, it's rewarding to get people talk to each other. Along with that comes, Mike Schmidt had a line, it's unique about being a star in Philadelphia. You get the exhilaration of hitting the game-winning home run, the night before, and then the angst of reading about it in the paper the next day. So when you're trying to bring together people of different philosophies and politics and try to bring them together, doesn't always go well. So we get a lot of backlash
Wow.
sometimes just for trying to bring those parties together. So cultural diplomacy is probably the slipperyest slope of anything that we work with.
And can our listeners support, or is this a private foundation currently, or is it a public
No,
or?
it's been around for 25 years. The Humpty Dumpty Institute. We're headquartered in New York, and we originated being mine remediation. So we would donate mine sniffing dogs. We would go into like we went into Vietnam, and we would go into areas, villages where there were a lot of people that were hurt, maimed, etc., and as a result of mines. And we would teach them how to do commerce and grow mushrooms and sell mushrooms and create a market. And so that was the origin of our organization. And then we developed a real close relationship with the State Department, and as an NGO became well known for the work that we do with embassies all around the world.
And how can people support? Like,
Just go to the HDI.org, and they could support, they could donate, but that's the website, thehdi.org.
In closing, I have a couple of your quotes that I want to ask you. Just shoot off the hip.
Sure.
What comes to mind? Here's one. I saw the world with clarity. I've always had more of an awareness.
I was an old 12-year-old.
Be fearless. You're young enough to go bankrupt 3 times and still be a billionaire.
One of my great mentors told me that, because the first time I thought I was going to go bankrupt, I was scared to death. And he said, come on, you're just a kid. You have time. And he was right.
And what, you were 28 then? 26? No, 34?
So at that time, it was the recession of 1990. So at that point, I would have been 35.
35. Okay. I hope that by sharing my experiences, I can be a positive influence in their life and guide them on a successful path.
Well, not only my family, but it's also anyone that has ever worked with me. I want to somehow inspire people to do good things, and that's way beyond business. That's be a great family member, be a great son, father, whatever, daughter, whatever the case may be. Just be the best you possibly can be.
I am a competitor at heart. I want to win, have fun, and help people.
My wife stopped playing miniature golf with me 40 years ago.
Economic success is kind of fun, but I love winning. To win in business is to have a good market, great product, and loyal customers. I'm competing, and that's what fulfills me.
Well, again, I say this, I ask people, if you had a choice between being rich or famous, which would you choose? And everybody chooses rich. And I say, if I had that choice, I would always choose fame. Not like, why? Are you that, arrogant and, that you want to be famous? And I'm like, listen, no one's rich enough to change the world, but some people are famous enough to change the world.
Cosmo, thank you so much for your time today. If there's one thing you want to leave for our audience, just one takeaway, call to action, what would it be?
Well, go hard, go fearless, and love your family.